Book 2, yeah. Chapters 1 and 2. And the rival conceptions of God. That's chapter 1. And then 2, the invasion. Book 2 is entitled, What Christians Believe. So I was thinking about what's popular today, what's going on, today. Think about revival and revolution. Has anybody seen the movie yet?
No. Jesus Revolution?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You've seen it?
Yeah.
Did you? Okay, we keep putting it off, but I think we want to go today, if we get there, depending upon what happens. I think it's there for at least up and through Wednesday. But, I guess people go for different reasons. I'm just curious because this was something that was happening when I was about 15 or 16 years old, and then it continued supposedly for. I didn't know at the time this was going on. Maybe I heard about it and just blew it off. Maybe I saw the cover of Time magazine or Newsweek or whatever it was that had coverage on this revival that was taking place out there, the Jesus Revolution. But it's just curious to me because, as I sit here and think back about what was going on at that time, things start, the lights start coming on. Oh yeah, maybe that did influence me. Maybe, I had the, all of you remember that famous album that came out back in about, 70 or 71? Jesus Christ Superstar.
Oh, sorry.
Jesus Christ Superstar. And I had that album, and it, for me, became one of those albums that I just listened to a lot.
8-track or LP?
No, it was the LP. It was the LP. And I had the poster on my door to my bedroom. That poster of Jesus with, it was kind of like a psychedelic effect. And he had the curls, real curly hair, and almost like this, not a smile, but a Mona Lisa kind of look to him. And he had the microphone in one hand, and he had the famous Catholic, blessing in the other hand. I could still see that on my door. And I used to listen to that album. I didn't get saved for another 5 or 6 years, but I always wondered, what was going on with me? I don't even know at the time. And it's just so curious. And then, what did you know? I get saved in 1976, and a couple years after that, Bob Dylan comes out with an album, Slow Train Coming or something like that, and it's amazing. I'm listening to every song, the blood of Christ and getting saved, and and then that famous song on the album, You Gotta Serve Someone. You know that? You gotta serve someone. It may be the devil, or it may be the Lord, but you gotta serve someone. Bob Dylan. I was convinced that he became a believer. I'm not saying that he didn't. I don't know. Very, very powerful words. And then I'm thinking about all this stuff. And I'm thinking about Lewis's book, Mere Christianity, and I'm looking at chapter 1, the rival conceptions of God. I'm thinking to myself, the rival conceptions of God. Really? This 4 pages on this? I'm thinking to myself, this is a book in itself. No, it's a series in itself. Now, it's a whole section of a bookstore. The rival conceptions of God. And then I look at it, and I recalled something that I just blurted out a few weeks ago, kind of like musing to myself. And I said something to this effect. Don't you remember? It's like the most important decisions come down to 2 things. Just 2. The way of wisdom, the way of folly. The door is open. Go through or not. Dylan. You got to serve someone. It may be the devil. It may be the Lord. But you got to serve someone. Man, it's just interesting, And then I look and see C.S. Lewis in this book 2, Chapter 1 boils it down to two things. That's why he doesn't go into all the Eastern religions, conceptions of God, and all this. And all. What are the two things? What are the two things? These rival conceptions that that C.S. Lewis mentions. You know what they are?
Those who believe in some God or gods and those who do not.
That's a good way of putting it. Does anybody else have any insight about how he characterizes this? I think he arrived at that, but at first he was delving into individual people's beliefs, and he broke it down into what he said on page 36, two ideas. You see that? The two ideas, what are they?
She has pantheism, Hindu.
Christian thought.
Pantheism and Christianity.
Yeah.
I mean, that's it, isn't it? Really, when you think about it? And how many times, like, when we go through book 1 in the chapter, that we realize, you know what? It's either this or that.
What's pantheism?
That was my next question. Did he define pantheism? Did he explain it? Did he? What did he say about it?
God is beyond good and evil.
Yeah, he is
Good or
the,
bad is one,
he is the universe, he's part of the universe.
The thought.
The universe is God, or God is the universe, or both, or...
There is no good
Yeah,
evil if you get far enough into it.
Yeah, if you go really far into it, it's like the force.
Yeah, when everything's good, everything's evil.
Everything's God. God is everything. And how many times have you heard this? Probably through the 60s while the revival was going on. You know? So that's it, pretty much. Pantheism and Christianity. But before he even gets there for himself, he's got to get beyond something on his own in order to realize that there's these two ideas. Do you remember what he was struggling with early on? What was Lewis early on, well before he started writing these words here? He was an atheist. Do you remember what he said about atheism? And about himself, for instance?
He really probably wasn't an atheist because he was mad at God. If there was no God,
Isn't that something? Yeah, you know, you find
why would he be mad?
when you get talking to an atheist, oftentimes the things they were saying indicates they're just mad at God.
Yeah.
Well, if there is no God, how can you be mad at him? Number one, right? So, but was there anything else he said about atheism?
Too simple?
Huh?
It's too simple.
It's too simple. It's like, you know what? I don't want to get into the difficulties of God and who he is and what existed before matter. You know, we came down to the two choices, right? The eternal existence of things. It's either person or matter. That's it. That's it. And to think that matter has or possesses within itself the power to exist eternally, it's pretty ridiculous, isn't it? And that's why, you know, I explained to you there were times when I just wanted to grab somebody, you know God exists, you know! And pretty much that was what Paul was saying in Romans chapter 1. For the wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of men who suppress the truth in unrighteousness. Because his eternal Godhead has been existing and known by all of you way before you even came along. Joe, you're thinking something here.
You seek the truth, you get it all. You seek anything else, you get nothing.
Isn't that something? Yeah. Any other thoughts? I'll open up with, I already opened up, but the chapter. Was there anything, as you were reading through book 2, chapter 1, is there anything that's just popped out at you?
I love the part about the fish
Did you?
in the water. It doesn't know that it's wet.
Yeah.
So like, I just forgot, but I just remember I read that like 3 times.
It was a wonderful illustration.
Yeah,
Great
because you don't
illustration.
even think about that because, so the whole part dark and light. Like that is, like he says it so simply, but not so simply. Like, you know, I mean, he's so smart.
Yeah. The concept of darkness needs the concept of light.
Right, you can't have.
And for instance, what strikes me about this, remember at 1 John chapter 1, verse 5, he says, John does, to the church there, God is light, and in him there is no darkness at all. That's what Christians believe. But we still have a little bit of a problem. It's not a problem in the sense that we can't resolve it. Our resolution comes from the fact that we believe what the Scripture says. And the fact that God is light and in him is no darkness at all just points to the fact that God was in the beginning. In the beginning, God created. And he made this, and it was good. And he made this, and it was good. And it was good. And it was good. Good. And the guy who ran up to Jesus, you remember, the rich young ruler? Good master. What must I do to inherit eternal life? And Jesus, I can almost see Jesus, if he was here today, he would be going, why do you call me good? He says. Remember that? Why do you call me good? Your concept of good is a little off. It's not correct. There is one good, Jesus says. There is one good, and that is God. And then he goes on to deal with the individual. Isn't that interesting? One good. So the concept of bad needs the concept of good. And he said something to the effect that bad is just a perversion of good. That's all it is. Bad is just a perversion of good. You have to have good. And he, in the second chapter, we're going to go and talk about dualism. I don't want to get there yet, because I'm just asking you guys in this chapter 1 of book 2, if there's anything else that jumped out at you. And thanks, Paul, for I was going to bring that out. The meaning of darkness depends upon the existence of light. God is light, and in him is no darkness.
I think
At all.
when they say in the beginning there was God, but when is beginning? But there's no time. I mean, to God there's no time. So
see, I was thinking about that yesterday, and you know what happened to me again? I had a rush. Did you ever get a rush? A rush? I mean, I'm not talking about, the rush from the early 70s rush. I'm talking about when you go out and look at the sky and you realize that just goes on forever and ever and ever. And forever and ever and ever. That within itself is a created concept.
yes.
And I was thinking about God. God has existed eternally.
I think that when they say in the beginning, they may say our beginning that we have a concept of, not his beginning.
Right.
Because he had no beginning. That's
He
what
did.
I understood.
But he had to have created.
Well, it's like saying the beginning as far back as your mind can,
Yeah.
your
So
finite mind can even think. That beginning.
So that's
God's
for our
God's there.
concept, not the way God's concept is.
Well,
Yeah.
I mean,
For our understanding.
Scripture was written in words that we can
We can
understand.
understand, but the concept maybe
Even the
not.
concepts, right?
Well, if that's it, then I don't understand that in the beginning.
you know what? I don't know that you really have to.
We have a concept of eternity, but we can't wrap our minds around it.
Yeah,
Okay.
Ecclesiastes says something to the effect that eternity is within the heart of man, or something to that effect. You know, it's like we get the concept. I mean, we can't get our mind around God, but it comes back to belief. We believe the truth, and sometimes you get a head rush when you're trying to make some sense out of it, because I hate to put it this way. Maybe this is kind of like a controversial statement, but salvation doesn't have to make sense to you. God, and that's one of the problems I had with evangelism explosion. Remember the 4 pages we memorized to present the gospel? And we just kind of like whittled somebody down to the point where we asked them the question, the big question, does this make sense to you? And if they said yes, whoa. Whoa. But you know, to me it was like, they don't say no. It doesn't matter. I'm telling you the truth, you know, because sometimes it doesn't make sense to me.
Because God does things differently.
I believe a lot of things that don't make sense. I think we brought up one time about miracles. You know, miracles are just like an invasion into, because we were talking, remember back in early on, we were talking about the law of nature, not the law of nature like gravity, the law of nature being, we know that there is a good and that we have violated it. That law. And then we asked the question, but the laws of nature, I mean, they're just solid in place, right? God has intervened. Like for instance, Joshua, oh God, make the sun stand still, and God did for a period of a day. I can't explain that to you because it's a miracle. It's from the good. It's from God. It's from what existed before bad ever came along. It was good, and it was good, and it was good. And then we read, there was Satan in the garden, interacting with man and woman, and now there's trouble. When we find out from other places in Scripture what actually happened. But coming back to chapter 1 again. What Christians believe rival conceptions of God. Talking about the meaning of light, right?
Can I pop something in here?
Go ahead.
More than 40 years ago when I was at work, like, excuse me, I got something in my throat. They said scientifically, like, God is light and in him is no darkness. But our concept of light actually is a picture, as we learn more scientifically, of God, because when you look at the light spectrum, we see the colors and the vision part of it. But on one end, there's light rays that are X-rays. And, I mean, if you take it maybe too far, it reveals something that we can't see, or it reveals sin. So that would sort of be God the Father. And then the vision part that we can see, that would be God the Son. And then the other end is, I think it's called luminescent, or it's the light rays that cause sunburn and skin cancer, and it warms your skin, but you can't see those rays. So that, I just thought that was interesting. So that would be like the Holy Spirit, you can't see it, but it has an effect on you.
Using light and what it does, and I don't remember much of it anyway, but using light as an illustration of the triune God, the Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit. I vaguely remember something like that, and it was an interesting, very interesting point. Yeah, interesting point. Anything else? Atheism is too simple, but what does the Bible say about atheism, by the way? What does the Bible say about atheism? Does it say anything about it? No. Psalm 14, verse 1. The fool has said in his heart, there is no God. So Lewis came to grips thinking about these things and declaring himself an atheist, saying it's too simple because it was just a carte blanche answer to all of the things he was struggling with. God, his existence, and it's just easy to say, there's no God. And that's what people do. There's no God. And he came to grips with the fact that, no, all this stuff is pointing to God, the existence of God, the good. and evil being a perversion of the good. It came along afterwards. There is one God, not two, like dualism says, and we're going to get to that in chapter 2. But before I go there, if you look at page 38 in your book, and Joan has an old book, so she'll have difficulty finding it. So
Oh, I think the pages are the same.
if you're looking at book 2, chapter 1,
Right.
around page 38,
Yep, yep.
I think at the very top, he says something to the effect that, talking about Christianity, and because he's talking about Christianity, he uses the word it, as though Christianity has a mind or something. It also thinks that a great many things have gone wrong with the world that God made, and that God insists very loudly on our putting them right again. Insist very loudly on our putting them right. Can you think, is there anything that comes to mind, anything in the scripture that comes to mind where you could say, yeah, that was God intervening there, and that's pretty loud. Conviction, I stand accused. I am part of this darkness now, and I need to make this right. I'm sorry.
Jericho, where he destroyed the whole place.
Wowie. Yeah. That was pretty loud, don't you think?
Yeah.
A whole city.
Some.
Sodom and Gomorrah. Yeah. The flood? I wrote that one down. The flood. The flood. And the tremendous upheaval that 40 days and 40 nights of rain. And you know the ark was floating around for like the better part of a year. Did you know that? Until it got on Mount Ararat. And can you imagine all of the upheavals that were going on? And I would submit to you today that weather patterns and earthquakes that are going on are just aftershocks of the flood.
I'm sure.
And it talks about the water, the old King James, I love.
What about
Sloshed. So yeah, that was a loud one. Anybody else?
Things today,
Today, if you want.
Euphrates is dry.
Wow. Yeah.
I mean,
You see, the loudness doesn't necessarily have to mean an audible sound.
but it wasn't that one of the, they say that when that, it will dry.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. Some people feel like that's the prophetic indication of the 200 million strong army of China being able to march across to where they got to go in Revelation and all that. We're not going to get into that. But any other loud things?
The resurrection.
What's that?
Resurrection.
Oh my goodness, got to be the loudest. You know, and I'm not talking about the fact that the angel came down and rolled away the stone and the language there, the initial original language indicates that he may have just picked that thing up and boom, boom, and then he sat upon it, boom. And the ladies that were coming, they heard an earthquake. And we surmised that it was just the angel descending, picking up the stone, boom, sitting down on it, boom, 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 all this rumbling going on, you know? That's like a 4,000-pound stone. That's 2 tons. Can you imagine that? Yep. Boop. Oh, that was loud.
Another cool thing, the angel didn't roll away the stone to let Jesus out. He rolled away the stone to show he's not there.
He's not there to let the world in. Yeah, he was gone. He was gone already. Jesus didn't need the stone to be rolled away, like Groundhog Day or something. You know, he just walked right through it.
Conversion of Paul, or whatever, that was pretty loud. What
You
he did
think?
to him for,
Man. Man. And then, I mean, sometimes, and I'm still struggling with some things. I'm getting my mind around it little by little. You know, I mean, when David was bringing the Ark of the Covenant to the temple, and everybody's rejoicing, yay, this is wonderful, trumpets playing, David's dancing around, and the oxen carrying the ark stumbled, you remember, a little bit in the mud there, and the ark was going over, and Uzzah touched the ark, and God said, oh, whack! Dead. And that just destroyed everybody. David was mad. He said, get that ark out of here. They gave it to Obed-Edom or something like that. He was all blessed because he had the ark, right? And then Nadab and Abihu, the sons of Aaron, they had just instituted the priesthood. And here's Nadab and Abihu, the sons of Aaron, ministering and doing, all the sacrifices. And so they offered strange fire to God. They didn't pay attention to every little detail. What's so big about that? Come on. Whack. Dead. Those are loud things that I think maybe Lewis is talking about when he's saying God insists rather loudly that we put these things right. Whew. Can you imagine if God was fair?
Well, he gave us instructions. I mean, that's the thing, if you don't go by the instruction book. The instruction book.
Yeah. I mean, if you want to do this the right way and protect yourselves, I mean, he told them very specifically, how to mix the proper things for the sacrifices and what to do and where to get the fire from, and don't cut corners. You don't want to get it from there. You got to go get it from there. And then there's another thing that might be an indication of what happened to Nadab and Abihu, because later on God says to Moses and Aaron, and when you go in to minister, make sure that you don't have any strong drink before you go in there. Did you see that? Take a look at Leviticus 10 and read on after that. And it's like, hey, this is have a little party before we go in, Not a good idea. Not a good idea. So yeah, when we follow God's instructions, he gave them specific instructions what to do. How about just follow them? And if not, you're going to hear from me rather loudly. I'm sorry.
Well, we actually studied Leviticus, and we realized that the whole thing is about teaching people to live with God.
With God.
And God's not just like us, so some of that stuff is kind of horrifying when you're reading it, you're like, what? But of course we don't have all the information, but really this is God. He was, God of the universe was going around and living with them.
Yeah.
So that's the whole book, is to teach them how to live with him. And so it's, because we were, and we were kind of lamenting, all of the rules and the rules on top of rules. But this was so that they could live with him and not all be dead. And, because he has power, he has so much power. So
Yeah, you can't live with them if you're dead.
kindness to them.
Taking it a little farther, it's there to show God's holiness, and he demands perfection, which we don't even have a chance.
Not a chance. Not a chance.
So-
And the audacity for some people to actually rebel against this, like the sons of Korah, Dathan, Abiram, saying to Moses, you're not the only one that can make offerings. We can do it too. And Moses fell on his face. Oh, God, spared their lives. And God said, let them do what they want to do. Tell them to come. 250 men and their families with their censers came to make an offering. And God said to Moses and the rest of the congregation, get back from them. Just get back. And they did. And God opened up the ground. And they all went, 250 men and their families. But the censers were left on top of the surface of the ground, and God said, go get them all and hammer them into the altar as a memorial. And every time you look at that altar and you see those censers, you'll remember what happened
Really?
to Korah, Dathan, and Abiram.
Brings in, or accentuates the importance and significance of the curtain of the temple being torn into
Yeah,
Yes.
from top to bottom.
Yeah,
Yeah.
That curtain, that was a
But,
thick
I mean, the
curtain. There's
significance
no
of
way
that-
anybody could have done that except God himself.
Jesus
But,
took care of the perfection.
yeah. So,
Anyway,
rival conceptions in 4 pages. Okay, that's easy. And here's my conclusion. Go ahead.
The important part of chapter is the crooked line.
Go ahead.
Oh, yeah, the crooked line's cool.
You like the crooked line?
That is
Yeah.
tremendous. Because our culture, the man, I've had atheists accuse God of raping him and, allowing all this stuff. And so it's probably stealing from God. So
Yeah.
I thought I'd give you a little open door
Yeah.
there, Dave.
yeah,
The crooked line versus the straight line.
Yeah, you don't know that the line is crooked unless you have a straight line first. I mean, he said this in that, he said it in a lot of different ways, right? I mean, the light, you don't know there's darkness unless you have light to begin with. You don't know you have a crooked line unless you got a straight one first. So that's,
So how
And then-
can they accuse our God, accuse us of doing wrong if they don't believe there is a right and wrong?
yeah.
That's stealing from God.
Well, and this is something Lewis, began to realize, and we didn't talk about this one either, was the fact that, you remember, he was getting pretty angry about God. He was getting angry, he was getting upset, and pretty much he was saying to himself, all this cruelty and injustice. And he realized, what right do I have to say cruelty and justice? I'm saying that because I'm measuring it against something. Right? So, cruelty and injustice means nothing unless you have the total absence of cruelty and injustice, unless you have perfection against which to compare this, and that's the conscience of man. And we'll see that in Romans 1 and 2 as well. When Paul's bringing up, hey, what about those Gentiles? And they got a conscience. It's written in their conscience. They know. They know that there is perfection out there, and that none of us have attained unto it. We've fallen. Well, we could continue on with this, but I just want to bring to a close Book 2, Chapter 1 by just saying this. God the Creator is good, and he is separate from the fallen universe. He's separate. It's not dualism. It's not two forces have existed forever. It's one. The other force came along at some point in time, and that's when we pick up chapter 2, the invasion. What invasion? I want to be honest with you. I'm slow sometimes. But I read through this, and I said, now I'm going to read through it again, and I'm going to read it for the purpose of finding out what he means by the invasion. And I'm still having trouble. Can anybody help me here? What did he mean when he said the invasion?
Doesn't he call this Satan's, battlefield?
Domain, battlefield. We are in enemy-occupied
Yes,
territory.
that's what I was trying to think of. Occupied territory.
That's where we are. Is that what he means by the invasion?
Well, part of it, I think,
Yeah.
because every day we're being bombarded by
Yeah.
Satan's.
Look, we don't know how long. Time is a created thing as well. And when we say a word, when we say a phrase, I don't know how long. That in and of itself is almost tainted in a way. We don't. So I'm going to say it anyway because I don't know how else to say it. We don't know how long God, in His goodness, was existing. It was for all eternity until He created, and it was all good. And some being came along. If you read Isaiah 14 and Ezekiel 28, you'll see that this being called Lucifer said, I will. 5 times. I will. He was going to push God off and be there. That was the rebellion. So you remember looking back to when we talked before about people are in denial, Romans chapter 1. They're in denial because they've been deluded by a deception. And the thing that started all that was a rebellion against God. That is where the darkness came. And by the way, does C.S. Lewis believe in a real devil? Does he? Does he believe in a real devil? Yeah, he does. He does. He said, I don't know about the horns and hooves, and I don't know about the pitchfork and all that stuff. But if you're asking me if I believe in the devil, yes, I do.
As an entity.
Yeah. I mean, right at the end of this chapter, he says that. I'll open it up to chapter 2, the invasion. What jumped down at you? Well, is there anything in here that really, wow, that's interesting. You know, he was thinking about atheism still. And he said, there's another view that bugs me. You remember what he called that view? I thought it was kind of funny.
Is that the view where you make God what you want him to be, so that I don't have my book in front of me.
That definitely is what happens in this view that he called, you remember, he called it Christianity and water. And what was that view? You remember what it was?
You make God
Pretty
what
much
you
what
want
I'm saying.
to.
Yeah.
You turn it to what you want it to be, so you can make excuses for what you're doing.
I
It
think,
says there's a God in heaven and everything is all right.
yeah. I think that's what that's what most people
Most people
say.
believe that,
Yeah, I mean, we run into people that say, oh, I believe in God. You know, in the back of your mind, you're saying, yeah, James says the devil believes in God and trembles.
And I'm good with it.
And those same people believe that everybody, when they die, goes to heaven.
That's the Christianity at work. There's a good God up there. He's really good. He's good and he's holy and he's all of that. Well, you know, this stuff about sin and, come on.
I'm basically a good person.
Yeah.
That's what you're asking.
Yeah.
Wow.
What kind of
I
God
do
would
more
send
good
people
things
to
than
hell?
It's another self-centered thought. That's what that is.
Ooh.
Well,
You know,
if God is so good,
Yeah.
why did he create Lucifer?
I've been trained for a long time not to say I'm a good person. Because anytime I started thinking about that way, I thought about, the guy that came up to Jesus, right, the rich young ruler. Good master, hey, why do you call me good? There's nobody good except God. Okay, now what do you want?
Well, that shows you that how far away from God that person is.
Yeah.
Because as you draw closer to God, you realize what a wreck you really are and how sinful you are.
Yeah.
And as you get closer, it becomes more and more apparent that He is holy and you are completely not holy.
Boy, oh boy. Coming back to the noise of the resurrection. You brought it out. The resurrection. I mean, I'm sitting here and I'm beginning to just kind of marvel again about what Christ did for us, right?
Mm.
He died on, he took it all.
The holy punishment of God.
The holy and just punishment of God, Christ took it. The invasion. Anybody else? Chapter 2 of
I
book
think you were talking, Lewis called God making religion simple. Christianity is in this, there's the Christianity where it's real simple,
Yeah.
and then Christianity where it's complex, according to Lewis. The simple one being, all dogs go to heaven.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, according to Lewis, there's only 2 views that face the facts of a universe that contains much bad and a lot of meaninglessness, and also contains creatures that know it. There's only 2 views, he says. What did he say they were?
Christian view versus dualism.
Christianity and dualism. Now, let's, maybe we talked about it a little bit already, but what is dualism? What is that?
Good and evil fighting it out.
Where's my book?
Double-mindedness.
Yin and yang.
I'm sorry, I missed what you just said.
Good and evil fighting it out constantly.
That they're separate,
Yeah, they're separate. And
independent.
it's always been that way.
A good force and a bad force, independent of each other, battling it out.
The
It's like
woman
the
and yang.
two on your shoulder, the two angels on your shoulder, there's the evil and the good one, and,
But they look like you.
look like Jiminy Cricket.
This, there's one sentence, this is a funny sentence to me, each presumably thinks it is good and thinks the other is bad. So bad thinks it's good and that good is bad, and good thinks it's good and bad is bad. You know what I'm saying? Like they both think they're, I
They
guess,
both think
right
they're
or
right,
good.
yeah.
It's funny, that's a funny thing.
And then he delves into
Well, that view looks good on the surface until you start talking about something.
Until you trace it back
Right.
using the crooked line.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
There was once a straight line
Because
to which you
we,
can measure crooked.
right, exactly.
Wow.
We being sinful creatures, we're not sinners, we don't sin, we're sinners. We think we are good. So, how do we measure the good from the bad?
So that's dualism, and it doesn't make sense. It just doesn't hold out for you. And do you now begin to see, Lewis says, and do you now begin to see, page 45, why Christianity has always said that the devil is a fallen angel? That it is not a mere story for the children, it is a real recognition of the fact that evil, I love this, evil is a parasite, not an original thing. So he's just canceling out dualism, and we're left again with one thing, the right choice.
Truth.
It may be the devil, or it may be the Lord, but you got to serve someone.
Truth.
The truth.
My favorite sentence in this is, in this chapter, Christianity is the story of how the rightful king has landed. I love that. You might say landed in disguise, as calling us to take part in the great campaign of sabotage.
Yeah, I love that too.
That's my favorite line.
We, as Christians, are involved in a great campaign of sabotage. You know, I always thought of, now the devil came along and did the sabotage. And I guess that's true too. But to be God who wants to make things right and sometimes doing that very loudly, and he did all these things we talked about, and the resurrection, now, in this fallen world, sin cursed, we are the sabotagers. Isn't that great? Isn't that great?
We were the light that,
Yes.
in the world that likes darkness.
He who knew no sin was made to be sin for us, that we might become the righteousness of God in him.
Amen. Come on.
Yeah,
Well,
come
we're
on.
supposed to teach the devil?
Huh?
We're supposed to convert the devil?
No, but we're sabotaging his work. And he knows it, and he's pretty mad about it. This is a lesson for another time. But think about how the devil thinks of prayer. I mean, this is heavy artillery. We're asking God, who's listening and is inviting us to the throne of grace, we're asking God to do something. Isn't it? I wonder why before Paul says in Ephesians 6 to pray, he talks about putting on the whole armor of God. The whole armor. Not just the shield against the darts, but the sword too, which is an attacking piece of equipment. I'm scared. I am about the thought of going on attack against the devil. I wouldn't recommend that to anybody. But Christ is in the front, man.
We're equipped.
I like how it says if you really want to know him, you will.
Oh, and that's something too. Yeah, if you want to know all about the hooves and the horns and the pitchfork, if you really want to know, I'm sure you'll find out.
You'll find it.
But no thanks.
Sometimes I think it's easier than.
There's more evil in this world than there is good.
Okay, some questions. We are done. How do people try to destroy Christianity? Okay, remember in the beginning he said they turn it into the 6-year-old thing where it's so stupid, and then you begin to talk about it, and all of a sudden, it's too complicated. You can't please these people.
Making my mind spin.
Yeah, that's what he said. And then he said one of the reasons why he believes in Christianity. You remember what he said about that?
Are you still talking about the simple, complicated part?
Yeah.
Yeah, where he says it because it is so, like if you ask someone about something simple and then you ask a scientist to explain that to me and break it down, it's way more complicated than what you're just seeing.
Yeah. Reality, in fact, is usually something you could not have guessed. That is one of the reasons I believe Christianity is a religion you could not have guessed. That's what he said. But anyway, we're going to have to stop there. And I'm having fun with this. So book 2, chapters 3 and 4 for next week. Let's pray. Father, we thank you for this time together. We thank you for C.S. Lewis and for all that he has brought to our hearts and minds. He is strengthening our faith in you, and we thank you for that. We now pray for the service to come, that your blessing would be upon the preaching of your word, and we ask it in Christ's name. Amen.